I'm Karen, 27 years old. My husband Steven is the same age and we got married just last year. Both of us work full-time. I'm a nurse and Steven works in pharmaceutical sales. We first met at a happy hour event organized by a coworker. I had been looking forward to unwinding after a long day at work, and the cocktails tasted particularly good that night. We had crossed paths before, but this was the first time we truly connected. Our conversation flowed easily, mostly about our preferences in drinks. Steven was into sake, while I loved wine. What started as light banter soon turned into something deeper. We discovered a lot of shared interests, and our chemistry was undeniable. Before long, we started dating, and everything felt effortless. On my birthday, Steven made our relationship official by confessing his feelings. It felt like a scene out of a movie, the romantic setting, the glow of candlelight, and Steven's sincerity. I remember feeling like I was the luckiest woman alive. Steven seemed perfect in every way, and for the first few months, our relationship was full of laughter and adventure. We spent our weekends exploring new restaurants, bars, and hidden spots in the city. It became our thing, discovering the best places for drinks. Even though Steven preferred sake and I leaned towards wine, it was fun teaching each other about our favorite flavors. As time went on, we started talking about the future, and I began imagining our life together. Marriage seemed like the natural next step. It was during one of these conversations that Steven opened up about his family. I knew he was close with his mom, but I didn't know the full story. Steven's parents had divorced when he was very young, and he had never known his father. Raised by a single mom, Steven had never moved out of their family home. At the time, I didn't think much of it. In fact, I saw it as a positive, proof that he valued family. In hindsight, it should have been a warning sign, but love has a way of blinding you to the truth. Steven's mother, whom I'll call Joan, welcomed me with open arms when we first started dating. She would invite me over for dinner frequently and often talked about how much she wanted Steven to settle down. "Karen is like a daughter to me. You need to marry her before someone else does," she would say, and I always felt touched by her words. She seemed so kind and genuinely excited about me joining the family. My own parents liked Steven as well, and everything felt perfect. When Steven proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. It felt like a fairy tale. Little did I know, the fairy tale would soon unravel into a nightmare. After the wedding, Steven finally moved out of his mother's house for the first time. We found a cozy apartment just 10 minutes away from her place. It seemed like a practical decision at the time, close enough for Steven to visit his mom regularly, but far enough for us to have our own space. In hindsight, it was a huge mistake. Joan, who had been so sweet to me before the wedding, changed almost immediately after we tied the knot. She started visiting our apartment every single day, unannounced, and often at the most inconvenient times. At first, I tried to be patient. I knew Steven was close with his mom, and I didn't want to come between them. But it quickly became overwhelming. Joan would show up in the middle of the day, or just as I was getting home from work, and it felt like I had no privacy in my own home. One evening, I gently brought it up to Steven. "I appreciate your mom visiting, but it's hard for me to relax when she's here all the time. Could you maybe ask her to come over less often?" I said, hoping he would understand. To my surprise, Steven's reaction was defensive. "Why would I do that? She's family. Mom gets lonely, and she just wants to spend time with us. You should be more understanding," he replied. I was taken aback by his response. I hadn't expected him to side with her so strongly. From that point on, things started to change. Every time I brought up his mother, Steven would get irritated, and we would end up arguing. I learned to keep quiet, but the daily visits continued. Joan began to act as if our apartment was hers. She would let herself in without knocking, rearrange things in the kitchen, and even make comments about my housekeeping. One day, I came home from a long shift at the hospital to find her in my kitchen, cooking without asking. I was shocked. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. "Your fridge is practically empty. Do you even cook, or are you just feeding my son takeout every day?" she snapped back. Her words stung. I prided myself on cooking healthy meals for Steven and myself, despite my busy schedule. "I shop for fresh ingredients every day, Joan. We don't live in the past where fridges are packed like sardines," I replied, trying to stay composed. But Joan wasn't having it. "I don't want my son eating food when we don't even know who made it. This is what happens when he marries an incompetent wife, she muttered under her breath. That was the final straw. I couldn't hold back any longer. I appreciate your concern, but this is my home, and I would prefer if you didn't let yourself in without asking, I said firmly. Joan's face turned red with anger. I'll tell Stephen about this, she snapped before storming out of the apartment. When Stephen came home that night, I braced myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Sure enough, he was furious. Mom called me crying. How could you be so rude to her when she was just trying to help? He demanded. I was stunned. Stephen, she can't just barge into our home like that. It's intrusive and disrespectful, I tried to explain, but he wasn't listening. You're overreacting. She's family. Can't you just get along with her? He shot back, his voice rising with frustration. The argument ended with Stephen retreating to the bedroom without eating dinner, leaving me alone in the kitchen, feeling defeated. For the next few days, the tension between us was unbearable. We barely spoke, and I could feel the distance growing between us. Finally, I decided to address it head-on. Stephen, we can't keep living like this. We need to talk, I said one evening. He sighed but agreed to sit down and listen. I get that you're close with your mom, but her constant presence is making me uncomfortable. We need to set some boundaries, I told him. After a long pause, Stephen finally admitted that giving Joan a spare key had been a mistake. I'll talk to her, he promised. His apology made me hopeful that things would improve, but deep down I knew it wasn't enough. Joan's behavior didn't change. In fact, she started coming over even more frequently, as if testing how far she could push me. One day she arrived with a bag in hand and a strange smile on her face. I brought you something special, she said, pulling out a box of Chinese tea. It's supposed to be great for your skin and balance female hormones. You'll love it, she added, pouring a cup for me before I could refuse. I hesitated but took a sip out of politeness. The tea tasted strange, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just a new flavor. That night, however, I woke up in the middle of the night with severe stomach pain. I was convinced the tea had caused it, but when I told Stephen, he didn't take me seriously. Karen, that's ridiculous. Mom brought that tea to help you, not hurt you. You're overreacting, he said dismissively. His lack of concern left me feeling even more isolated. Without any proof, I couldn't accuse Joan of anything, but from that moment on, I became cautious around her. I started avoiding anything she brought into the house, including food. The tension between us continued to build, but Stephen remained oblivious, or perhaps he just didn't want to see it. As Stephen's birthday approached, Joan took control of the plans as if I didn't even exist. She called me one day and said, I'm cooking for Stephen's birthday. You're welcome to come, but I know you're busy, so don't worry if you can't make it. Her tone was condescending, and it was clear she didn't want me there. I was hurt, but Stephen didn't seem to care. We can celebrate your birthday next month, he said casually, as if his mother had more of a right to celebrate with him than I did. On the day of his birthday, Stephen went to his mother's house without me. When he returned, he was in high spirits, raving about the wonderful day he had spent with her. I felt sick to my stomach. My feelings for Stephen were starting to change, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. A month later, it was my birthday. I had assumed we would celebrate at our favorite restaurant, just the two of us, like we had done before. But Stephen had other plans. Mom wants to celebrate with us. She'll be happiest if we all get along, he said, oblivious to how hurt I felt. I tried to explain that I wanted to spend my birthday with just him, but he didn't get it. You're overreacting again. Just come to dinner. It'll be fine, he insisted. I gave in, but the dinner was a disaster. Joan dominated the conversation, and it felt like I was a third wheel at my own birthday celebration. The final blow came when she presented me with a bottle of vintage wine as a gift. It's worth $5,000, she claimed, uncorking the bottle with great fanfare. But the moment she poured it, I knew something was wrong. The wine was cloudy, and the cork was crumbling. Memories of the Chinese tea incident came flooding back. I hesitated, but eventually took a small sip. It tasted awful. What is this? I spat it out immediately. Joan looked offended, but I couldn't hold back. "This wine is spoiled," I said, pouring the rest down the sink. Stephen was furious. "Apologize to Mom," he demanded, but even he couldn't deny that the wine was undrinkable. Joan tried to make excuses, claiming she had no idea the wine had gone bad, but I didn't believe her. My trust in both of them was shattered. That night, after Joan left, I told Stephen I wanted a divorce. He was shocked. "Why? What did I do?" he asked, completely unaware of the damage his mother had done to our marriage. "Ask yourself, Stephen. You've put your mother's needs ahead of mine since day one. I've had enough," I replied. The next few days were a blur. Stephen tried to apologize, promising things would change, but it was too late. I had reached my breaking point. To make matters worse, during one of our arguments, he admitted to having affairs with multiple women. That was the final nail in the coffin. Asterisk, I filed for divorce, and Stephen didn't fight it. He went back to live with his mother, and I moved on with my life. I later found out that his affair had become public, and he had been demoted at work. Unable to cope with the shame, Stephen quit his job and started working part-time. Joan's hoarding tendencies, which I had always suspected, became a problem for their neighbors, and the police had to intervene. I heard that their house is now a mess, filled with junk, and neither of them seems to care. As for me, I'm finally free from the chaos. I've returned to my career, focusing on myself and my future. Breaking up with Stephen made me realize that love really can blind you to the truth. But now I see things clearly. I'm stronger, wiser, and determined to never let anyone take advantage of me again. The lessons I've learned from this experience have shaped me into a better, more confident person. I'm ready to embrace the future, without Stephen and without the toxic influence of